In this module, we're going to look at real life math applications. So these are going to all be word problems. And with word problems, every one is just a little bit different. And so some key strategies that you can use when you're approaching these are the main thing is you just need to read them carefully. Think about like, what are they asking you to find? What are you given and what do you need to find? Um, Underlining key numbers, key operations, anything that you feel like is important is always super helpful. Try to write an equation, or you can just do step-by-step calculations. So you don't always have to write a fancy equation to solve these. Label your final answer. Use units. Try to make sure you're using the correct units. But labeling things is really helpful. So just some final tips. Always check your units. Check to make sure you're using the right units. Make sure that your answer makes sense. And I know that seems kind of silly sometimes, but it really will help you. You can use your calculators. You can use your calculators for the difficult questions that have kind of weird numbers, especially the ones with decimals or fractions. And then label your answers, okay? No naked numbers. So always label your numbers. All right, so let's look at some examples. And with word problems, the more problems you do, the easier they will get, okay? So example 1 says, Tiffany bought a car part for $38.74. If she paid with two $20 bills, what was her change? Okay, so she bought something, right? She bought a car part for $38.74. She paid with two $20 bills. And what we're trying to find is her change. So how much money did she give them, right? So her total paid, we just kind of collect our thoughts, right? She paid with two $20 bills. So she paid $40. So if we wanted to figure out her change, well, she gave them $40, but she only owed $38.74. So to get her change, we're just going to subtract. That means that they owe her back $1.26. And that's it. Number 2. Last year, Susan's average telephone bill was $93.45. In October, her telephone bill was $128.32. How much more than last year's average was the October bill? So last year, Susan's average telephone bill was $93.45. Then in October, her bill was $128.32. Then it asks how much more than last year's average was the October bill. Anytime you see this how much more, well, it's just trying to figure out what was the difference, right? Like how different were the two things? And to find a difference, you're just subtracting. So we're just trying to find the difference in those two bills. So our first bill that was higher, because we always want to subtract the bigger minus the smaller. That's why I switched those orders there. And so the difference in the two bills, $34.87. Okay, the next one asks us to find perimeter. Okay, well, perimeter is just the distance around the entire figure. So we're going to take each one of these sides and we're going to add them up. So we've got 2.8 plus 5.8 plus 4.33, 2.24, and 8. And we're going to add all of those up. And again, you can use your calculator for that. And when we do that, we get 23.17. We're going to add our unit, and it's perimeter, so that means that our unit doesn't change. So it's centimeters. And again, make sure you're pausing and checking to make sure that you can get these values. Number 4, Adam buys $10.75 worth of gasoline for his car. If the Sheetz gas station has a one-day sale and charges $1.479 per gallon, how many gallons did he get? And we want to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so he bought $10.75 worth of gas. Okay, they got a one-day sale, and they're going to charge $1.479 per gallon. So we need to know how many gallons did he get. Okay, so we just need to divide. Okay, his total price divided by how much he paid per gallon. Price per gallon. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to divide the price he paid for his gas, his total price. We can divide that by the amount he paid per gallon. And if we do that, what we'll get is the number of gallons that he purchased. So rounding that to the nearest tenth, we get 7.3 gallons. Okay. Number 5. Gary earns $9.12 per hour working as a math tutor in the math tank. He worked 25 hours last week. Calculate Gary's pay before taxes. So he's making $9.12 every hour, and he worked 25 hours. So to calculate his pay, we're going to take how much he earns per hour. So 9.12, and multiply that by the number of hours he works. And so when we multiply that, it gives us a total of $228. Number 6, Nash Community College Culinary Arts is planning to plant corn in circular plots. The diameter of each plot is to be 48.5 meters. What will be the circumference of each of the culinary's plots of corn? Use 3.14 for pi. So if we want to know the circumference, first we have to know the formula. Okay, so it tells us that we're finding the circumference. So the circumference formula is pi times diameter. And it says that the diameter of each plot is 48.5 meters. And then it also tells us to use 3.14 for pi. That's important because if you use the pi button in your calculator, sometimes it will give you a slightly different answer based on the rounding. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the circumference, which is C. Okay, and just to make sure that you remember what circumference is, okay, so if you have the circular plot, the circumference is the distance around it, so that dark purple. The diameter is going to be from one side to the other going through the center. So the diameter is 48.5 meters, okay? So circumference is pi, and we're going to use 3.14, times the diameter, which is 48.5 meters. And then we could put that in our calculator, and we would get 152.29 meters. Okay, so we have one more circumference problem. Find the circumference of the circle, then use the approximation 3.14 for pi and approximate the circumference. Okay, so in this one, it does not give us the diameter, it gives us the radius because the radius is halfway across. So right here, this is the radius. And so when you're looking at the circumference, the radius is half of the diameter. So the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. Okay, so we could think of the circumference as being pi times diameter, but we could also think of it as being pi times 2 radius. Okay, so if we wanted to calculate it for this one, we've got pi times 2 times 4.7. So if we wanted to get this as an exact answer, right? Because it says find the circumference of the circle. So if we wanted an exact answer without putting that pi in there yet, we would say 2 times 4.7 and get 9.4 pi, and I could just leave pi in there, okay? And that would be yards. So that would be one version that you could get without using pi. Then it says use the approximation 3.14 for pi to approximate the circumference. So now I'm going to actually go and I'm going to do 9.4 times 3.14 to get an approximation. So 29.516 yards. So this would be the approximation. This would be an exact value.